What's up, gang? It is I, Carlton Flowers, your crypto pro.
Yay!
And since our last Bitcoin update, we are buried out at the blue baseline. So what is happening next? As a matter of fact, I need to shift this over a little bit. There we go. We're sitting at the price of 40,180. We dipped down to the bottom of the support and resistance zone here. We were right at 39,000 and bumped up just a little bit. So where do we go from here and what's it looking like? Well, we might have a slight bounce up. And what do we see here on the stochastic? We had a crossover. We were coming up, but then it unfurled and we moved down to that 39,000. Now we have another crossover and it's looking like the stochastic wants to come up and crawl out of the oversold zone. It also looks like the oscillators on the MACD are about to cross over. You see this blue line, that is the fast line. It's curling up and headed towards the slow line, which is the red line. And we're also printing these light red bars on the histogram. So the indications say that we're due for an upcycle. Now, a lot of people are talking about Bitcoin failing this point and moving down towards the next support resistance zone here in the 39,000 area. We got two nodes, one here and one there, that are possible targets. And then the next would be the node at the point of control price, somewhere around 37,000. And then there's the next support resistance zone. But for right now, according to the 4-hour chart, we've got to wait for this cycle to complete, which does not mean that this stochastic is just absolutely going to continue up, because as we saw before, we had that fake out right there. So in order to know just what's up ahead, we've got to look at the 1 day and then the 1 week chart. So let's clear this out, jump to the 1 day chart and see what we're looking like here. It's not quite as good looking of a chart here. As you can see, we have this very negative direction on the stochastic. Look, it is really scary to see this divergence, and that is the distance between the fast line and the slow line, the blue and the orange there. And we also have a crossover, a definite crossover on the MACD, and now we are printing negative bars on the histogram. So how can this be so different? Well, the reason is we have 6 full cycles that complete on the 4-hour in order to make a 24-hour. And on the 1 day chart, we have momentum heading downwards. And so what that would kind of indicate is that if the overall direction and momentum on the 1 day is headed downwards, we might not have enough momentum on the 4-hour chart to stay above. So we might crawl up for a little bounce up and mess around in the support resistance zone between these two limits here. But then overall, we got to wait and see what happens when we jump down here and see what this completes and looks like. This stochastic looks like it wants to make it down in here into the oversold zone. And the momentum is just starting on the MACD here. As you can see, the crossover has happened, and now we're down here below the 0 line. So that's what we have to watch out for on the 1 day. And I think that's why so many people are bearish right now. It's amazing how many times in the last few days that people have flip-flopped on their position. It seems every day sentiment changes. 3 days ago, everyone was saying we're going to break out, blue skies ahead. And then we turn right around, and after that big red candle right there, everyone said, we're going down to 30,000, 20,000. It's looking grim. And then we popped up a little bit and people thought, we're moving back up. And then we got another red candle and they flip-flopped again. So you cannot make sense listening to all of the people who change their minds on a daily basis. And what we can do is look at the chart and just see what's happening here. So overall, we see that the 1 day chart is really overshadowing that 4-hour chart because we're not done with this complete cycle down. So here's what it looks like if we draw the 4-hour cycle on this chart. So while we're within this 1 day movement, we would have this happening 6 times on the 1 hour chart. And that's why overall, for right now, it's looking like that we will probably dip down once we finish the little rebound of what we're showing on the 4-hour chart. Now, how do you play this? Now, of course, none of this is financial advice. Don't play around with your money, and definitely don't be out here on leverage, because this is no man's land. We don't know what's going to happen, and we have a lot of conflicting indications. While some people think we might bump up, all of the world news is pointing towards negativity. We have the Russia-Ukraine situation that is also changing on a daily basis, and we cannot trust the news. I'm thinking that we're being played. They're playing us for fools, and they're using this news to manipulate our emotions and to fool us into making bad decisions. Keep in mind, it is the goal of the market makers, the leveraged exchanges, to throw you off of the path of where this thing is being manipulated to be pushed. This whole crypto market is still small enough and unregulated enough that it can be manipulated. Now, while we have the negative situation in the Ukraine, we've got the situation happening in Canada. That could be seen as a positive and a negative. So on the negative end, we have the government that is playing a strong hand against the truckers and the barricade and the protest over the virus. And that causes uncertainty in the market because we don't know what's going to happen and how that's going to play out, as the Canadian government is going so far as to freeze people's bank accounts who are donating money to the cause. Excuse me. We also could look at this as a negative, where they're even going so far as to say that you cannot do GoFundMes, and you also cannot send crypto to support the movement. Now, I'd like to see them actually make that happen, but there's ways around that, because what's happening is, while they can't stop the flow of Bitcoin to certain people's hands, they can force the exchanges to not allow those people to cash that Bitcoin out to fund the movement. Some people will view that as negative, which causes more uncertainty, which could affect the price in a downward direction. Others view it as a positive, because they're saying that now we're starting to see how Bitcoin and crypto can be used to fight against the tyranny of governments in the world, while they're taking away people's rights to have an opinion and to do what they want with their money. So take that for what it's worth. And just know that that is why I'm in a hold pattern. I'm not doing anything right now. I'm waiting to see what this one-day situation, this chart here, is going to play out. And then I'm going to start the DCA. So here's actually my strategy, and you do whatever you want to do and what you can afford. But if we do continue downward, I'll start to DCA if we're doing this. So as price is starting to dip down like that, if it does dip down, that is my zone. Well, I'll say I'll buy a little here, I'll buy a little here. I would definitely buy a lot if we get down here below this support resistance zone. That would be wild if we did get down there. I'll believe it when I see it. I'm not going to make predictions and say, oh, it's definitely going to go down. And I won't even go so far as to say that it is most probable that we would have a dip like that. What we can do is say, break down the probabilities of what the chart is looking like for right now. Now, when we look at the position of the stochastic, the probabilities are that with this negative momentum here, and with this crossover and this negative momentum here, we'll look for the next volume node, which is right there. Okay, and the price of that volume node is sitting at 38,000. That's about the best that we could assume for right now, based on the evidence that is right in front of us. Now, we did have a question on the last video as to what I was talking about when I said that there was a slip zone. Now, I coined that term. That is just my own term that I use that explains the phenomenon of what we see when we enter into an area where there's not a lot of trading that has gone on in the past based on the price. Here's what I mean. When you look at these bars down here, this is volume. And this is your horizontal volume that tells us how much volume of Bitcoin was traded at a particular time in one day. So when you see this big bar going from here to here, this one right here, that's how much Bitcoin was traded at this particular juncture on or about the 17th to the 18th. So in a 24-hour period, we had a total of buys and sell orders. And then when you average those together, you end up with a candle. So let's just say, for instance, you had this amount of buying, and then you had this amount of selling. Well, here's what you do. You subtract the total selling or total buying from the selling, because the selling is greater than the buying. And then you end up having an average, which ends up being this candle to this point. That's the volume overall. On the VPVR, it's different. We are looking at the total volume of trading of Bitcoin that happens at a specific price. So when you see a node, which is what we call it when you have this sticking out like that, at this particular price, let's say at roughly 42,293, you had this much trading volume that went on. And you can see that we have a gold and we have a blue. One represents the amount of purchases. The other represents the amount of selling. So this would be your selling. This would be your buying. And then it sticks out there. Now, the slip zone is what I call these areas where we don't see a lot of volume. So let's say here's one slip zone. There's no volume here based on this visible range of the chart. Okay. If we move the chart in and out, this changes. So if I say, let's scrunch in more of this price history, we get a difference in the VPVR because it's reflecting the trading history to this left edge of the chart. Now, how do we use this? Here's how we use it. So we look at the fact that there was a lot of trading going on right here at this price. And then we bump up again when we hit around 37,000. But in between here, it drops down. See that? And so what happens in this slip zone is this. Whenever momentum is going downwards, we can very quickly slip from this price down to that price. When the market is trending upwards, if this is an uptrend and we're sitting at this node here, we can very quickly pump up to this next node. Or from here, we could pump up to this next node because of these slip zones where there's not as much volume in between. And then here's a big slip zone down here, which tells me that if we fell below this bottom support and resistance zone, and what that means is in the past, whenever you see these little boxes, these rectangles that I've drawn, these are points where, let's say, price is moving up and price is moving down. It might bottom here, and then all of a sudden it moves up again. And so this is a support. Then let's say if price got rejected at that point, we call that a resistance. And so it might bounce up and down in this zone. So that's what makes that box. Now, when we fail this zone, we go down to the next one. Then we might see price jumping around and bouncing on this one. Just picture this as a table, a shelf. And if we fail that one, we start to test the next support and resistance zone, and then so on and so forth. Same thing happens if you're moving up. So let's say we moved up and then we bounced off of this one. We hit our head on the ceiling and we came down. And the next time it blows through, well, then what was resistance before becomes support. And then you might have something like this happen. We get up into this next support resistance zone, and then it blows through that, comes down, and it might treat it as support the next time and move up. That's why I have those rectangles drawn in so we can see what has happened in the past. All right, so last but not least, let's just jump to the 1 week chart and see what it looks like, because we might get a couple more clues from it. Let's see here. There's the 1 week right there. We have to scrunch this down. We'll pull this out, and then we can see the nodes again on the 1 week chart. And there's two things that I'm looking at. I'm looking at this stochastic that's starting to curl down a little bit. So the possibilities of what can happen look something like this. Let me scrunch this down. Here's what could happen. We could start to curl back down and go back down into this oversold zone. But then this overall looks like it's going to come back up, maybe. But it's not guaranteed because sometimes we get a double hump. See here how we moved up and then back down? You would think it would head down below the zero line, but we had 1, 2 little bumps, right? There's the first one, there's the second one. So there's no guarantee that this is going to complete a cycle, make it to the zero line, and then start to go up into the green. It could, in fact, do something like this and come back down again. We just don't know yet. And one way we can tell is to look at the overall momentum, which is negative, because here at the peak, we have a lower peak here. And from this peak to where we're at right now, you're looking at this type of overall direction. So we don't know. That's why it's too early and why I am in a hold pattern. Did you learn something new? Did I answer your questions? I hope that you did learn something new. And if you have a question about this TA, let me know. Type it in the comments below and I'll try to explain it to you. Let's clear this out and go right back to the 4 hour one more time. Reset that chart and we'll end it on this. We're just sitting right here on the line waiting to see one of two things to happen. Do we fall below the line and head to this volume node? Or is it going to end up being support and we bounce up further and head towards that node? It's a 50-50 shot right now, maybe 49% up, 51% down. That's about all that I can get out of this right now. And this weak action here, since it can't decide what it wants to do, that's why I think that there is a chance that we can hang out down here in the oversold zone a little while longer. Well, that's all I've got for now. I'll be back again tomorrow. We'll take a look at the Bitcoin action and see if we get a decision before the weekend is over to know if we've got some awesome sale prices on altcoins coming up here in the near future before we head back into a bull run. This is Carlton. That's all I've got. We'll see you next time, and I am out.